Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you are on the globe. I'm very glad to welcome you to this IBMA Biocontrol Insights with a spotlight on the US. I'm Isabel Pinsauti-Babczynski, IBMA Senior Advocacy and Outreach Manager, and I will be the moderator for today's session. Just a little housekeeping rule. The questions will be answered at the very end. So after the first and the second session. And you should put your questions in the chat. So don't hesitate to put them as the speakers are speaking. And we will take care to look at them and answer to them at the very end of this Biocontrol Insight. Thank you very much for your collaboration. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor to IBMA Executive Director Jennifer Lewis for a short update on the IBMA recent activities and highlights before we look at what's looking on in the US.
Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining this webinar. I trust you can see my screen. Yes, so I just welcome and thank you. Thank you to BPIA members for joining us today for a spotlight on the USA. Before we go to the US, a 10-minute update on what's happening in Europe, maybe even 5. But just as a reminder, I know you all know this, but we do have 3 European institutions, the Parliament, the Council of Member States, and the European Commission, which is the main executive body that has the commissioners and the officials writing legislation and various advisory bodies. And I'm just going to give a comment on each one of these 3, what the status is. So when we look at the Commission, so we have support from the Commissioners for Agriculture and the Commissioners for Health, Hansen and Borrelli, for biocontrol. Why is this important? It's particularly important because we have a simplification procedure for biocontrol coming in the 4th quarter of 2025. So we've had meetings with the Commissioner Cabinets on the 18th of June, 2nd of July, and they're reinforcing their continued support. And also, very importantly, reinforcing the fact that this simplification procedure will come in the 4th quarter of 2025. We know that member states have been asked for their comments by the Commission on biocontrol to input into this simplification procedure. And indeed, DG Santé, who are responsible for pesticides and biocontrol, have issued a call to evidence last week to help them justify the proposal for simplification. And we have to submit some more data by August, and IBMA will be approaching members for any additional inputs that we don't already have. Then in Parliament, and thank you, Isabel, for all the work she's done in this area, there's a non-legislative proposal going through Parliament at the moment. This came out as a draft report in June and is now being debated as we go forward in the Agri Committee and the Environment Committee, and will go to vote probably in October in a plenary session, which should be, all being well, just before the legislation for biocontrol comes out, which is important because that gives more weight to the whole biocontrol discussion and indicates that most MEPs already have their positions clear, which should speed up the way through Parliament. And then the last point was really about Council. As I mentioned, member states have already been asked to comment on biocontrol ready for the proposal of simplification. We expect this proposal to come out at the end of the Danish presidency. So the presidency changes every 6 months. Every member state becomes a president for a period of 6 months. The Danish are very supportive of biosolutions, and the Cypriots, who will come after, which is where we expect and when we expect the big debate in the Council to be in the beginning of 2026, will be during the Cypriot presidency. So their support is important. And then for whatever still remains, the Irish presidency will have to pick that up in the second half of 2026. So we would hope that we should move forward with a proposal and that can enter into force in 2027. And that's really all I wanted to do as an update. And I think any questions we're going to cover at the end, Isabel. Okay, thanks so much. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yes, indeed, we will cover the questions at the very end of the webinar. Don't hesitate to put them already in the chat. Therefore, we will go to the second part of this Biocontrol Insights. Thank you very much to BPIA members who have accepted to speak in this Biocontrol Insights and tell us more about what is going on in the US in this very specific moment, to say the least. I would like to present you very briefly the three speakers who will speak today. We will start with Megan Priest, independent consultant, former Delta Analytical Corporation. She will tell us about what is the current situation for biocontrol authorization and timelines through EPA federal agency. Then Karen Valketin, Director of Regulatory Affairs in Agrosphere, will speak about what is the Farm Bill and how will it impact the biocontrol industry. Finally, Bonnie McCulloch, Senior Managing Consultant, Environment and Health in Rample, will tell us more about what are the current initiatives in the US legislation and how will they impact the biocontrol industry. Please, Megan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Isabel. Hi, as Isabel mentioned, my name is Megan Priest, and I'm going to be going over the current timelines and staffing and budgeting at EPA. Okay, Bonnie, if you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So, as everybody knows, we had a recent presidential election change with transitions, and that, as common, does impact multiple government agencies across the board. With the transition, EPA underwent several changes in the staff at the highest level as well as down to the lower levels. And just to add a little background to this, when I'm talking about EPA here in this webinar, I'm speaking specifically to OPP, the Office of Pesticide Programs at EPA. This is not, I'm not covering the Office of Water or anything like that. So just to clarify a few things there. So with the new administration, President Trump has enacted several policies aimed towards the government agencies, one of which has led to a reduced workforce. Within several agencies, EPA was definitely impacted by that as well. In March of this year, 388 employees were terminated within EPA overall, with some of those being within OPP. Since March, OPP has experienced several more group departures of staff, some 5 people here, 15 there, due to a rolling timeline of the forced retirement or location requirements of having to be in the office instead of working remotely. So that's been kind of a rolling impact on the overall staffing within EPA. Due to all of those changes, EPA OPP is expected to have less than 500 employees by the end of this fiscal year. Just to give a little perspective on that, for EPA OPP to feel completely comfortable with the workload and timelines, they would like to have around 650 full-time employees within OPP. And to make it a little bit smaller for perspective for the biological focused aspect of this, BPD, which is the EPA's Biopesticide and Pollution Prevention Division within EPA, they have around 49 people as of now, compared to 66 people about 2 years ago. So we have definitely been feeling the impacts of the reduced staff, and EPA is feeling that as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. And this is just a graphic to show the overall decrease in staffing. You can see from 2021, 604 full-time employees, which you see the FTE up there, down to 536 this year. So it's not just the presidential administration that changed things. It has been an overall decrease due to various things, budget cuts, and just a lot of different outside forces impacting the overall staffing for EPA. Next slide, please. Thank you. And for a little bit update on the funding and appropriations for OPP or EPA. So EPA receives funding from multiple sources. with the PRIA fees, which is the Pesticide Registration Improvement Act, being one of the sources. For reference, those PRIA fees are the fees that registrants pay when you submit an application for EPA to approve. New products with data, amending an existing product with new toxicity data or something like that. Any type of data requires a fee for service for EPA to review it. And so those fees, some of them are a couple $1,000s, some of them are over $200,000, help support EPA. And unfortunately, EPA received $10 million less in PRIA fees last year than they forecasted. There has been some discussion within the industry and EPA as to why there have been less submissions from the industry to EPA. And some of the companies have said that's because of the delays at EPA. The companies themselves are trying to consolidate their actions so they don't have multiple actions being delayed. So it's just it's one fee compared to multiple smaller fees, and it's taking longer to get those submitted because they are consolidating everything. Some of them, the companies are focusing on research and development, so they're not updating as much. But a lot of the feedback is because of delays at EPA, companies are now not wanting to submit as many actions, which then means less money, which then means less funding for new employees. So it's quite the cycle here that we're experiencing. Outside of the PRIA fees, EPA also receives funding from different legislative actions, such as the Agricultural Appropriations Bill, and those are currently being worked on within the government agencies now, the government sectors up on the Hill. And the ultimate goal was to have a minimum budget of $166 million and establishing guardrails for EPA to ensure transparency and trying to meet this PRIA deadlines. So there are quite a few different numbers and budgets being floated around that are obviously changing day to day depending on the votes. So once everything becomes final, we can provide an additional update on that. Okay. Next slide, please. Thank you. So right now, as EPA is experiencing a lot of delays, as we have seen. Part of that is because of the short staffing. Part of that's because of the budget, as I've explained. But also, EPA is still citing situations that happened back in 2018, 2019, such as the government shutdown, as a reason for the delays, the backlogs, in getting PRIA actions through as well as non-PRIA actions. So there's a lot of things working against registrants getting their submissions out in a timely manner and EPA meeting their deadlines. So EPA, obviously they're well aware of the delays and the issues. The divisions within EPA are working on developing efficiencies to overcome those and try to reduce the backlog as well as start meeting the timelines that they're supposed to be meeting. So combined with the less actions being submitted and the new efficiencies, we're starting to close that gap. It's painful, but we're getting there. It's just taking quite a bit of time. Next slide, please. So this is just a slide to show the percentage of late actions. This is for all of OPP right now. So you can see over the years how the number has decreased of actions, but you can also see how significantly they were delayed in the beginning, which kind of tells that it started decreasing with those big delays. And the amount of actions have been significantly reduced, and there's obviously still a lot of delays, with 71% in 2025 being late. But we're hoping that we're on the uphill swing, but we will see. Next slide, please. Okay, now to break it down to the biological specific part of OPP. So EPA has provided a recent update that about half of the pending PRIA actions within BPD, which is the biological section, are on time, and other half are late. The trends are moving in the right direction, and for the first time in Q2, BPD is closing more actions than they have received. which I know does not seem like a very high bar to the rest of us, but it is good. It means we're moving in the right direction with EPA. And the next section is direct feedback from BPI members that currently have actions pending. So for new active ingredient registration, which normally takes about 10, new active ingredient registration is 10 months past the PRIA due date. Fast track amendments, which are, you don't pay for those. There's like label amendments to update directions for use, so something like that, are taking it over 24 months when they normally have about a 90-day timeline. And that is because the PRIA actions, which are the fee-for-service ones, are taking priority because those are mandated by law. You pay for a service, you're supposed to get a certain timeline. The non-PRIA actions, fast track, label notifications, those are not mandated by that timeline. Another reference is a PRIA amendment, which does have a timeline, is 6 months past the PRIA due date. For this particular action, EPA is supposed to review it within 6 months. Once you submit it, EPA has 6 months to review. That particular instance, it's taking an extra 6 months to get it out. So they have doubled the time that they were expecting with the fee that they paid. And to just give a little bit more background and statistics, every year EPA provides an annual report on PRIA and the due dates, how far past the due date they went, and each code, because there are several different codes within PRIA, it's a new active ingredient, new product, and which ones are taking the longest. So these are just a few that we pulled out just to give some reference from EPA's numbers. So for a new active ingredient with a tolerance exemption petition, according to PRIA, PRIA 5 timeline, it has 20 months for EPA to complete once you submit it. It's currently taking 34 to 37 months to complete. For a new product using a registered source of active ingredient, within PRIA 5, that's a 9-month timeline for EPA to review. It's taking 10 to 13 months to complete, which isn't terrible, but not great. Another one is an amendment with a registered source. Takes about 5 months. According to PRIA, is now taking 7 to 17 months to complete. So as you can see by these numbers, it's just very inconsistent, and EPA is not hitting any of the deadlines in a consistent manner. Next slide, please. So some of the efficiency strategies that I mentioned earlier, these are the specific BPD ones that EPA is focusing on so that to try and decrease that backlog and meet the timelines. I was going to mention a couple of these. Identifying low-risk groups, which risk assessments can be streamlined. Cross-training staff. So for a little bit of background on this, within BPD, there are two divisions, the microbial branch, or two branches, excuse me, the microbial branch and the biochemical branch, and they handle different types of biologicals. So with the microbial branch, due to the nature of the products, they receive less applications overall, and their workload is then less. So the goal now for EPA is to train some of the microbial branch team members to help the biochemical branch team because of the higher number of products coming in, applications, as well as the number of staffing on the two branches. So they're trying to cross-train the two different branches there to help. And as I mentioned, PRIA submissions and actions always take priority, which means the backlog for the label amendments and things that are not fee-for-service keep increasing. So BPD has dedicated non-PRIA days where the staff members and reviewers just focus on non-PRIA actions for that day. They don't look at anything else that day. That way we can get as many actions out as possible without getting distracted by the PRIA fee-for-service due dates and that coming dates. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and for now, this is basically what's next. It all depends on what we get out of Capitol Hill regarding the funding and the budgeting, as well as with these new efficiencies, how much they will help EPA. But it seems like we're going in the right direction. And regardless of what comes out of Capitol Hill at the end of the voting session, BPA will continue to support and advocate for additional funding and continue to work with EPA daily to figure out ways that we can help EPA meet the deadlines so that everybody is happy at the end of the day. And that is the end of my section. Thank you, everybody.
All righty, so looks like it's time for a discussion about the Farm Bill and how the U.S. Farm Bill is going to impact the biocontrol industry. So Bonnie, next slide, please. So what is this thing called the Farm Bill? If you actually look anywhere on any document, you'll never actually see something that says Farm Bill. They have all these, fancy names and such. But basically, the Farm Bill, it's an omnibus piece of legislation that generally gets renewed about every 5 years. That's the goal. And it has a whole bunch of different funding and sets ag policy for anything agricultural related. If a farm bill doesn't have like a follow-up farm bill in 5 years, they can quote unquote extend them and extend funding on the farm bill and stuff, and basically say, well, we'll sort of keep status quo and we'll move forward, or we'll change these appropriations. So due to this all-encompassing nature of the Farm Bill, what happens is you often have a bunch of things that are overall ag-related, but basically you can't find a lot of things that tie them together. So when the U.S., when we made a policy about cannabis as far as it being from hemp, industrial hemp with low THC, that was in the Farm Bill. So those sorts of things. So it's a great sort of place to drop in some small piece of legislation, policy, and try to get it through, because generally the Congress has been they are motivated to do the Farm Bill because the farming lobby's pretty big, and obviously agriculture and farming are very important to the U.S. Next slide, please, Bonnie. So how then does the Farm Bill impact biocontrol? So as I was saying, legislation related to pesticide and fertilizer products, including biologically based products, is often included as a small portion of the Farm Bill. And what we're dealing with is sort of like what you guys were dealing with before you amended the fertilizer regulations in the EU. We have no legal definition of biostimulant as a term anywhere at the federal level in the US. So it's not defined in pesticide law. For fertilizers are regulated at the state level. There's no overarching federal regulation for fertilizers. So biostimulants is sort of hung out there, and it's sort of like, what is a biostimulant? Since nobody really has a definition, it's subject to interpretation by whichever people might be looking at your product and reviewing it. So at the state level, there is a loose organization of state regulators called AFCO, and they sort of set these sort of overall what they call model bills, policies. Bonnie's going to get into this a lot more detail in her presentation. So the states are starting to do stuff, but the issue is because we don't have a federal definition, therefore whatever they're doing could be the federal governmental officials may not agree with that, or there can be some conflict. So part of what we're trying to do is to set up at least a very base level, what is a biostimulant, and the fact that biostimulants are not pesticides and should not be regulated that way. So what we've tried to do is use the Farm Bill as a vehicle to introduce and pass legislation. And there is something called the Plant Biostimulant Act, and that's been introduced numerous times to define a biostimulant and specifically to go into the pesticide regulation, into FIFRA, and specifically exclude it from that because the current definitions that we have over there could potentially encompass biostimulants, and that's where we wind up having a big rub. Next slide, please, Bonnie. So the Plant Biostimulant Act. Original language for the Plant Biostimulant Act, BPIA members got together and drafted this basic outline. I mean, if you look at what's proposed for the Plant Biostimulant Act, I think on paper, double spaced, it's 2 pages. So there's not a lot there. It's what we would call a marker bill. It could pass on its own, but generally you try to throw it into something like the Farm Bill and you get that sort of consent. Nobody is going to be, you know, hemming and hawing probably over the specific words in this sort of a piece of legislation. And as I was saying, right now, biostimulants often run afoul of pesticide regulation because we have a definition of something that they call plant regulators, though everybody calls them plant growth regulators. Actually, the statute speaks only of plant regulators, and potentially that makes them subject to registration and regulation under FIFRA. So what the Plant Biostimulant Act would do, there is actually a section that says, and EPA will promulgate rulemaking that will expressly exclude plant regulators that meet this criteria for biostimulants from that definition. Because right now, certain other things are already excluded, vitamin hormone mixtures and that sort of stuff. And we need to put something in there to make sure that we exclude things that are acting only as a stimulant and not having any direct pesticidal effect. Or if they have both, then it's going to be a dual use product potentially regulated under both of those things, but that it would create a pathway, an off ramp for biostimulants. So we've also drafted change language for EPA for them to utilize for rulemaking. We did that quite a while ago. We gave it to them. We are aware that they have drafted their own language. They have something sort of ready that's sitting there, but until or unless they get direction from the political establishment above them, nothing is moving on that right now. But again, that's pretty simple stuff that just says, all right, we take these things out. Next slide, please, Bonnie. So the current status, the Plant Biostimulant Act has been introduced numerous times since 2022. And it gets introduced both as a House bill and a Senate bill. We have co-sponsors, a Republican and a Democrat for each house, for each bill, and then a whole bunch of other people who've been signing on to that. So we really do have bipartisan support for putting this through. It's a matter of the hemming and hawing over everything else that's going into a farm bill and whether or not we want to be paying for those things. And that's been sort of derailing this. And as I mentioned before, it is a short standalone piece, but it is intended as a marker bill in the omnibus bill. But failing that, we obviously are willing to go and support this in any way, shape, or form that we can get it through. And we would support putting this through as a standalone act if we can get it to go through that way. And we also have, in discussions with EPA say, well, you can actually do rulemaking before any sort of statutory change, because it is within their purview to do that. But I think that, again, since they don't have direction from above that they're feeling that they cannot do that at this time, but we keep lobbying for that. Next slide, please, Bonnie. laws are or bills are introduced here in the US is we have a Congress, and that's a 2-year period on the odd numbered years because the folks in our House of Representatives are always elected to 2-year terms that always start on odd number years. So each reconvening becomes a new Congress. So there are 2 sessions of that, one that begins January 3rd of the odd number year, and then the second session begins January 3rd of the even number year. That's one Congress. And if a bill is not passed by the end of a 2-year Congress, then it needs to be reintroduced yet again at the next Congress in either one of those sessions for reconsideration. So that's one of the issues we've had. This has been introduced. We've gone through a Congress, didn't happen. So we wind up coming in again, and now we've had to come in again a third time. So the current versions that are introduced right now were both introduced on the 23rd of May into the 119th Congress first session. So we have the House bill and the Senate bill, and those are the 2 co-chairs. There is some language in, I want to say, in the House bill, I may be misstating that, that has some additional language about this having to be a low risk ingredient or some such thing like that, that EPA had folks put in there. Doesn't line up with the other proposal, and we really don't like it because nobody really has established what is this low risk. There's no criteria specified there. So we are trying to get that language taken out, so that it's broader, and so we then internal policy in the agency can shape exactly what would constitute a compound that would qualify as a biostimulant. Next slide, please, Bonnie. So what's next? Yeah, that's basically, I think this is what we're all doing, and we've been doing throughout, is we continue to chat up folks on Capitol Hill to keep lobbying for this. But with the economic situation that we have here and all the major cuts we've had to programs, it's difficult to see when we're going to get a new farm bill. And, I think this language would be in it. But again, that farm bill keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed because it should have been renewed already. So yeah, that's sort of where we're at, and we'll keep you guys informed if anything changes. But obviously, every time we're hopeful that we can get something through, and yeah, stay tuned. So I think that's it for me, and I appreciate your attention.
Great. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Karen. And as well, thank you to IBMA for inviting us today. So fingers crossed, we are at a critical inflection point in the US where federal lawmakers are actively working to define and formalize plant biostimulants under FIFRA and to modernize biotechnology oversight. At the same time, EPA and AAPFCO, or APFCO, are advancing parallel efforts to standardize labeling, terminology, and product claims, which will affect how biocontrol and biostimulant products are regulated and marketed. In this section, I'll introduce the National Biotechnology Initiative, walk through the key features of the proposed Plant Biostimulant Act and their anticipated impact on the industry. I'll also highlight how some state-level adoption of beneficial substance definitions is creating a more coherent pathway for commercialization. So as we've discussed, you've heard some of this already, there are 2 major federal bills that have been introduced in 2025 aimed with the intention of shaping the future of biostimulants and biotech in the US. The first I'll just introduce is the National Biotechnology Initiative Act of 2025, which proposes a whole of government approach to advancing US biotechnology, including a mandate to streamline and modernize regulatory processes across agencies like EPA, USDA, and FDA. While not specific to biopesticides or biostimulants, the legislation is expected to influence product approval pathways by promoting interagency coordination, data sharing, and regulatory clarity. This is especially important for innovative microbial, RNAi, and genetically engineered products. For biopesticide and biostimulant manufacturers, this could result in clearer guidance, reduced redundancies, and faster reviews for products that currently straddle multiple jurisdictions or those that lack defined regulatory lanes. One example, as Karen mentioned, are these dual function products. The primary focus of the next few slides is going to really reinforce or provide further interpretation regarding the Plant Biostimulant Act and discuss the new Uniform Beneficial Substances Bill. So the reintroduction of the Plant Biostimulant Act signals a renewed urgency around these formal definitions and regulatory alignment. In parallel, the states have initiated action through the Uniform Beneficial Substance Bill, which is further shaping biostimulant oversight at the state level. So far, we have over 26 states that now have adopted harmonized definitions and label requirements. I'm going to spend most of my time talking about this Uniform Beneficial Substance Bill. So the Plant Biostimulant Act, let's start there. So this is designed to resolve long-standing regulatory ambiguities across EPA as well as USDA. We know the Plant Biostimulant Act is intended to foster coherent oversight and alignment with global and state-level frameworks. We know the Act is going to define biostimulants as substances or microorganisms that enhance natural plant processes, such as nutrient use efficiency and abiotic stress tolerance, independent of nutrient content. It excludes fertilizers, inoculants, and pesticides, establishing clearer boundaries under FIFRA. Upon enactment, EPA must revise its regulations within 120 days to create a distinct category and approval process. In addition, or in parallel, USDA would conduct a 2-year soil health study on biostimulant benefits, for example, runoff reduction and carbon sequestration, to better align and demonstrate benefit to implementing sustainable ag practices. A formal FIFRA definition could reduce risk of misclassification as plant regulators, especially for microbial or natural products making non-pesticidal claims. Regulatory clarity and harmonization may improve market predictability, but could also introduce new data or cost burdens for products that straddle biostimulant and pesticidal functions. Clearer labeling and regulatory pathways may accelerate innovation, especially for dual function, such as a biocontrol biostimulant product, if implementation is risk proportionate. Ongoing industry regulator collaboration is critical here to maintain efficient and science-based pathways for low-risk products while upholding environmental or agronomic standards. The Uniform Beneficial Substance Bill provides a model regulatory framework developed by AAPFCO to guide state-level regulations by aligning around a formal definition of plant biostimulants and beneficial substances. This is a state, just let me emphasize that this is a state-level action. This is not a federal action. The bill reflects it's a national effort intended to modernize and unify state regulatory actions for plant biostimulants and beneficial substances. While all AAPFCO member states endorsed the initiative, each state must individually enact or rulemake to integrate it into their own fertilizer and soil amendment regulations. Ultimately, nationwide adoption would create a foundational framework for a U.S. federal biostimulant program, filling current gaps until Congress or EPA establishes a formal authority under FIFRA. The bill defines recognized types of beneficial substances, including humic acids, seaweed extracts, microbial inoculants, protein hydrolysates, and more. It introduces a standardized label format to communicate intent, mode of action, and composition, helping regulators, retailers, and end users distinguish these products. The standardized format aims to streamline multi-state registration by aligning claims and use categories, thereby further reducing any confusion. As of mid-2025, more than 26 states have adopted or initiated rulemaking to implement the Uniform Beneficial Substances Bill. So this slide highlights the intersection of EPA's draft guidance for plant regulator claims and the state-level Uniform Beneficial Substance Bill. In 2023, EPA published draft guidance to clarify when plant-related claims may be considered plant regulator claims under FIFRA, thereby requiring registration at the federal level, such as, and these claims examples would be like increases yield or stimulates root growth. In contrast, the Uniform Beneficial Substance Bill establishes a state-level pathway for non-pesticidal claims, with these claims, examples of these claims improving nutrient uptake or enhancing abiotic stress tolerance. So while EPA guidance focuses on regulatory triggers that invoke FIFRA, the state bill offers a compliant route for products making non-FIFRA claims. Manufacturers must ensure claims do not cross over into pesticidal territory. Label language and data substantiation here is really critical. These two efforts are working in parallel, where EPA defines the federal boundaries and states create a permissive space for legitimate non-pesticidal biostimulant claims. Products with dual claims, such as pest suppression plus plant health, may still fall under FIFRA, requiring coordination with EPA. The state-level definition does not override FIFRA, but it creates a more defined space for those non-pesticidal claims. Companies should carefully review marketing language and separate pesticidal and non-pesticidal use cases to maximize regulatory efficiency. The EPA draft guidance on plant regulators provides a clearer framework for evaluating which claims require federal oversight. Understanding the regulatory interplay between EPA and the state models helps to avoid misclassification and facilitates a more predictable market entry. My final takeaway thoughts: the reintroduction in May of 2025 of the Plant Biostimulant Act underscores timely momentum toward sustainable ag tools. Federal and state actions are converging on formal recognition of plant biostimulants, with implications for how biocontrol companies can label, market, and register their products. Regulatory clarity from legislative updates is expected to help reduce uncertainty, to support innovation, and to promote sustainable ag tools. But stakeholder engagement is essential to maintain proportionate requirements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Megan, Karen, and Bonnie, for all this information and insights about what's going on in the US. It was really nice to hear and discover, at least personally, a lot of important information. I'm looking at the chat and at the Q&A, and I don't see any question. Any last minute question that somebody would like to write? In the meantime, I would like to underline that this webinar has been recorded and will be available on IBMA members area together with the presentations. So if you would like to find them back, or some of your colleagues who couldn't, or other members who couldn't be present, you will have access to them. I don't see any questions. Maybe I should give the last word to Jennifer before we close the webinar, in absence of questions.
Thank you, Isabel, and thank you, Karen, Bonnie, and Megan, and thank you to all of you who are listening in. Apologies for the slides apparently that I was presenting were not on full view. Apologies for that. I didn't see that soon enough. I think really interesting to hear what's happening in the US, and very interesting to hear that you've kind of got almost some similar problems to us, but almost in a different order. So for you, a lot of the challenges are how to get the biostimulants in there. And for us, a lot of the challenges are how to get definitions and recognition around biocontrol. And so it's almost the same issues, but in different ways for the different parts of the biological portfolio that we all have. I'd be very interested to see how US EPA decides to modernize their biotechnology regulation. If I understand correctly, this national bill that there is to think about it. And I'm sure we'll be coming to you for an update on where everything's going with that in the coming months. So thank you very much. And if there are no further questions in the chat?
No questions.
Great. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day or a wonderful evening, depending where you are. Thank you very much.